Hello, this will be a demo to help you set up a web page and a layout. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, so if you need to, go back and pause, rewind the video as needed. So first we're just going to do a quick site setup. We have the Files panel over here. I'm going to click on Manage Sites. Also make sure that you have the latest copy of Adobe Creative Cloud Dreamweaver installed. So I'm going to hit Manage Sites. I'm going to make a new site. And I'm just going to call this my work. And to find a folder for it, I have one set up on the desktop already called my work. Now at this point, anytime you create folders or files, avoid putting spaces in those files. That'll once you put files on the server, servers don't deal with that very well. So what I like to do is I'll anytime I have a new word, I put in a capital letter, so that's a good idea. So I'm going to have a new site called My Work, and all my web files will go in under there. And I'm going to save that. Pretty much went with the default settings there. I'm going to hit Done. And now I actually can see my local files, and anything I put in here will actually be the same files that I will see in the folder itself, as long as this is set to local view. Now, there are different views for your server and things like that, but you'll worry about that later. Let me spread this panel out just a little bit. You can read a little bit more of what we have. You can close or change these panels as needed. So I'm going to make sure I'm in this folder here, and I'm just going to create a new file in here. So I'm going to actually right-click right in there, and I have new file. And I'm just going to call this, actually let's call it layout. You can call it whatever you need it to be, .html. Alright, so let's go ahead. I'm going to double click and open this up, and we will have an empty file. So let's go ahead and, this is a live view, but we can also look at just the code here. Or we could actually do a split view where we see a little bit of both. Our screen real estate for this recording is a little bit limited, but I'll keep this on split for now and adjust it as needed. One of the first things you want to do for any website is to give this a title, and I like to just do it within the code inside of this title tag here. Or actually you can go to Modify Page Properties and pull that panel over here, and you have title, and this will replace that same thing. So we could just say Layout Exercise as our title, and that filled that in right there in the title. So you want to put your code and content inside the body here, and I'm going to use the code window and just insert some divs. So I'm going to have div, I'm going to use IDs, we're going to have a header area, and I'm just going to put some text inside of each div. Divs are just boxes or content holders, so you can put text in there, you can put other tags in there, anything you need. And then I'm going to close that div off, and you see that pop up in the header. Now any of these divs we put, you won't see any styles or anything applied to it, no widths or heights or anything. We know nothing about this box. Right now it just makes the box as big as what we put in there. Now we can also insert divs from the menu if you like the visual approach. Insert div, we've got a panel that pops up, and you can kind of put it in these different spots, but at insertion point is where your cursor is there. And then for the ID is what we're putting in. For this one I'll put navigation and hit OK. So this actually filled in a little bit of extra text in here, and we can actually change that. Now you can do it in the code, or you can do it in this split view up here as well. So I'm just going to say navigation. Navigation. There we go. So like I said, you could do code, or you can do it from here. You can use menus. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I'm going to do a couple more divs here. So we'll have div ID equals, let's see, we're going to do, one thing I forgot, which you might do, which is a typical thing, is to actually put a wrapper around the whole thing. So let me go back here, and I'll put wrapper. close that. And actually these divs are going to be inside of that wrapper. So we can actually go ahead and indent. I just selected them all and hit tab, and that indents them all a little bit. So we can actually see from the code that is inside of this wrapper div. So then let's go back here to where we were. So we have a wrapper, and we're going to have two different columns of content in here. So we'll just say content 1, and content 2, and these could be a sidebar or photo or whatever. I'm just going to call it content 1 and content 2. Now note this is an exact, I'm not doing the assignment exactly, so you'll have to take what the video shows you here and then apply it to your specific goal for your assignment. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in a footer as well. There. And so we can see our 5 different sections. Now do note there are some HTML5 tags now that can replace some of these divs and IDs. I'll go ahead and stick to what the class is showing. But for instance, instead of this div, you could actually have a header tag and say header like that. And there's a navigation and some other kind of newer tags that you can use, but the divs actually work fine as well, so I'm going to leave that in here to match up with the course. So now we have these 5 things, and now we want to add CSS to it so that we can tell the code how big we want these boxes and such to be. So the first thing we need to do is pull up the CSS designer. Right now there's no CSS attached. There's no style. So the first thing you have to do is look in your sources here, and we actually have to add a source for where the CSS is going to be located. So there's a couple different options. We can create a new CSS file, which is what we're going to do. If you actually had one already, you could attach one that already exists. If you define in page, it'll actually add your style rules inside of the head area right inside this page. Now the problem with that is it will only work on this page. Usually for a website you want your CSS to be consistent across many pages. But you can have CSS rules in here. But for this assignment we actually want an external style sheet. When it's inside the page it's actually an internal style sheet. But we want external, so we're going to make sure we create a new CSS file. So we get a dialog box, and we could actually browse and kind of check out where we want this to go. I'll go ahead and show you a best practice for that. Our index, our layout.html is actually in here. I'm going to create a new folder and just call it CSS. So that's in the same place as this layout. And then I'm actually going to put my CSS file in here, and I'm just going to call it styles.css. If I could type. Now you could have the CSS file right along with your HTML as well, but this is a little more organized. Sometimes you have more than one CSS file as well, so it's not a bad thing to do it like this. So I'm going to hit save, and this is the path that's going to plug in, and we leave this defaults here and hit OK. Now you can look and see the code that was added. It adds this link reference that says from where you're at, which is where this layout file is, go into the CSS folder and then find styles.css, and that's where your rules are going to be. So now we have the styles.css, and that's going to be where we're going to start adding selectors and properties and rules. So a couple different ways you can do this. Let's actually select the header by clicking on it. We're going to work on the header first. I'm going to click the selectors panel and open that up. We're probably not really going to need the sources, so I'm going to click that and close that up and create more room. So a selector is, it'll, like if you have a div or a piece of content or something that has an ID or a class, you want to select it, and so that's kind of where we start. So we selected that header, and now I can hit the plus, and it recognizes that we're inside the wrapper. A pound sign means it's an ID, and we're actually inside the header as well. Now you don't, can be a little bit complicated, but this is an accurate way of doing it. You can actually also just have header there if you want, but we'll just leave the default and be happy with that. So if you select that, you're now inside that CSS. You can actually look at the CSS file here, and you'll see that it's created this block, and inside of these brackets you're going to add these different CSS properties, but we're going to do it from the panel over here. You could just type them in as well. Like actually I'll go ahead and just do one. You could say color blue, for instance, and that's a rule. And you'll notice my header changed to blue. Like I said, we're going to do it mainly from the panel here, so let's go back to my layout file, and you'll see that that rule got added in to the properties here. So notice there's a little checkbox here that says show set. This shows any CSS properties that have been set already. Now we set the blue so we can actually see that, but you may not be familiar with all the different CSS properties. So if you uncheck that, you can actually see a long list of all the different kinds of CSS properties that you can add. And you can scroll through here and even experiment to see what kind of things you want to do. I'm going to leave that unchecked because we can then just plug in some values for some rules we want to add. I actually want to go back and do my wrapper first. So I'm going to select that in the code because you can't exactly see it very well from this view menu. It's kind of invisible. There's no content in there. So I'm going to click it from here, and I'm going to do the selector, and it got just the wrapper that time. Make sure that's selected in blue. And then I'm just going to make this, I'm going to click in here, and we want pixels, and so I want 1,000 pixels width. We're not really going to do too much with the wrapper at this point. The wrapper is something that you might pay attention more in the future to. So let's actually, I'm going to select the header now, and we're going to work on this box. So I need to change my selector here to make sure that I actually am working on that CSS rule. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and set that to pixels, and that's going to be 1,000 pixels wide. And now you can see this start to spread out. Actually, let me change this to something smaller that will fit into my smaller window here. So I'm going to say 400, and let me go back to the wrapper. 400. It's a little too small. Let's see, what can we get here? How about 900 for the wrapper and 900 for my header? Nope, not quite. Let's see, 700. There we go. That fits in there at least. And we'll change the wrapper to 700. I'm going to set the height for this. So pixels again, and we'll say 100 pixels for that height. Oops, I might have the wrapper. Actually, I want. So you can hit the little delete icon there if you want to get rid of that. I want the wrapper header. So height, pixels, 100 pixels. And let's scroll down here, and you can look some of the different options here. We have some text, and I want background color actually, so I'm going to click on that, and you can actually give that header a background color. I'm just going to pick whatever, hit enter, and now we can tell the size and shape of our div box here. Now you can start to add in other things. You can, your text properties, you can change like we did the color, but there's also the font family, the size, all these different kinds of things to manipulate what you have going on inside of here. But right now we're just trying to get this basic layout set up. So we'll focus on that for now. So I'm going to click the navigation to go to there, and we're going to add a selector for that. And now we have wrapper navigation. Hit enter. And we want to do properties for this. So for their navigation, I'm just going to do something like, we'll do 50 pixels. Let's just say that's kind of narrow. Oops, that's the width. What do we have? 700 pixels. And the height, we're going to do 50. And we'll scroll down to background color. Now, another thing, if you know the properties, you can actually close this out and you can add the properties right down here. So I'm going to type background, and you get these hints of what the different options are if you start to get more familiar. Background color, and on this one we don't have that nice little dialogue to pick the color, so I'm just going to say gray. I think that'll do it. Yeah, there we go. There's color names you can use as well, and you can kind of get familiar with those and that kind of thing. And then we'll have two content areas. So let's do something with those. We're going to do the selector again. This time, wrapper content 1. We'll do properties, and so we'll just say width is 700, or no, we're actually going to make different sizes here. So we'll do width 100 pixels, and we'll do height. Let's say our content is 300. You can kind of see what's happening here. And we'll say background color. Oops, background flip. Background. Oops, let's delete. Start over there. Doesn't want me to delete it. Oh, because I didn't define it. Background color. Let's say yellow. Let's try to get rid of this. It doesn't like it being undefined there. Kind of a bug. Can't get rid of that code because I need something in here. Okay, now I can delete it. There you go. Background color yellow. Let's work on the... I'll select it in the code this time. Content 2. And let's do it differently this time. Let's actually use the CSS. So let's... we could follow the same pattern. Let's look at the code. So we see everything we've added in the panels has been added to the code. So I can actually copy this code block here, and we'll say wrapper content 2, and this time, let's see, we have 700 pixels to fill of our width left over because we used 100 already, so I'm going to fill that with 600. I'll keep the height the same, and this time we'll make it orange for the background color. Very good. And we can actually go back and look at our view and see this other block. Now, what we need to do is actually float these blocks because they're just kind of going one after the other. Blocks by default will always jump down to the next line, so you have to ask it to behave a little differently. So we're going to select this content 2, and we are going to let's look at our different properties. And we have float right here. We can actually float. You have to do it for both of these that you want in this section. So we're going to float this to the left, and that won't change anything. Now this one jumped over, but this content 2, we're going to do float left as well. Oops, let me make sure I have my selectors, the right selectors selected here. So content 1, we want to float left. There we go. And content 2, we float left, and you see that the widths add up nicely to fit into that same box. Then the last thing we have is that footer, and that's going to jump down to a new line by default. So select that footer, hit a selector to create that, hit enter there, and we'll say width, and we'll do our 700 pixels again. And for the height on this one, let's just say we'll have a really large footer. So let's say 300 pixels, that's really large. And we'll do a background color for that. And we'll just make this green. And one last thing we have to do, you'll notice the footer hasn't, the size and whatnot hasn't showed yet, and that's because these two items are floating and this item is not. It's a lot to explain at this juncture, but I'll provide a couple resources to help you figure out this a little bit more. But what we need is we actually have to have this footer clear these two floating elements. So there's a property called clear, and we want that to be a value of both, and that clears both the left and right columns. And once I hit enter there, then I can see my green and my footer. So we have a whole page layout here, and now we can fill these areas with content, and we have our basic page set up. Now, one thing you might want to do is click on the little globe down here in the bottom, and you can preview. It's off screen there, but I'm going to hit preview in Google Chrome, and that is going to open this up. And oh, actually, it's going to tell me that I need to save. So make sure you're saving your files, and then that pulls that up in Chrome, which I dragged over right here, and you can see your page in a browser. So hopefully this will help clear things up, and you can do these boxes and sizes however you want. There could be different layouts, but play around with it and see what you can do. But hopefully this will help get you go in the right direction.